Hey, welcome back to my top 20 favorite movies. Well, you must have already watched the other top 10, so let's get to the upper half. Here are my top 10 favorite movies. Number 10. Citizen Kane. Yeah, I know it's kind of a cliche to have this on the list, but I can't help it, I just love the movie. I saw this film in high school. I remember saying to myself, yeah, come on, greatest movie of all time, show me what you got. Literally, as soon as the movie started, I was hooked. I love the atmosphere, I love the gothic angles, and I love the character study of Mr. Kane as he's seen through various people. It's obviously the film that changed everything in terms of movie making, but it still really holds up in my opinion. I love the characters, I love the way the story is told. Every single shot in this movie is just unbelievable to look at, even by today's standards. The shadows are just wonderful. It just complements the mood and atmosphere that the movie is trying to create. Now I know it's weird putting what's considered the greatest film of all time in the number 10 spot, but remember these aren't what I consider the best films of all time, they're just my personal favorites. Either way, I think Citizen Kane is going to stay on the list. The greatest film of all time? Yeah, it's kind of hard not to like it, isn't it? Number 9. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I love just how creatively ugly and unpleasant this movie is. It's so tasteless, so gross, so insane, so unwatchable, that it's hard not to appreciate it. The story about a journalist and his attorney's search for the American dream both satirizes our world while also creating its own. It's literally like you've entered another dimension, a world that's uncompromising, unsympathetic, and never apologizes for it. They're sent to Vegas, where people are told the American dream can be found, where you can go from a poor person to a rich person in one night. Their journey shows that the American dream is just flat out dead, replacing the ideals from the possibilities of the hippie movement with carnivorous greed and acceptance for mediocrity. The American dream now is savage, unfocused, and delusional. And of course, it takes a person like Hunter S. Thompson to show it, always with one foot in reality and the other foot in a pit of madness. It's not always pleasant, and it's not always nice, but that's the world the movie intended on making. It's depraved, wild, and totally out of control. I've never seen a film that was both so much fun to watch and yet also so hard to watch. It's a freak of nature, to say the least, an experience like no other. God bless every demented minute of it. Number 8. The Dark Knight. I love how this film wanted to push the idea of a superhero to the next level, juggling ethics, choice, anarchy, and the responsibilities of people all in one movie. This is the film that made me consider the real possibility that comic book heroes are this century's Greek mythology. The fact that they could create an adaptation of Batman that's so faithful and yet so different from all the other versions was really fascinating. I love how far it wanted to push the envelope, and that marketing to kids played little to no part in it. It was a movie purely for adults, nobody else. And while I do have issues with it at times, I really do like what it did with the genre. And in many ways, I think it did raise the bar for other comic book movies. It seemed to reach across the room and speak to everybody. Even people who don't like comic book movies could find something they enjoyed in The Dark Knight. There's always something to talk about, something to discuss, something to raise an eyebrow and get people chatting. Plus, being a Chicagoan, I just love the way they shot our city. It just looks so friggin' cool. Like I even need to talk much more about it. It was an edgy, dark, action-packed drama that entertained the brain as well as the eyes. Number 7. Good night and good luck. I didn't really know who Edward R. Murrow was before this movie, so I'm really glad I could be introduced to him this way. The question about how far do you take journalism is questioned quite often in this movie. Murrow goes beyond just reporting the news. He actually points out that what's being done in the McCarthy era is wrong, and challenges the government to prove otherwise. This starts a war of rhetoric, as both sides attack one another and what they think is right for the American people. I just adore the dialogue in this movie. I love how calculated, calm, and to the point it is when fighting such a controversial battle. It's all done in language, not with political stunts or planned distractions, it's just all words. I could hear the words that Murrow spoke to the American people over and over, they're so brilliantly chosen. It's a very poignant work about standing up for what you believe in and taking the responsibility to follow through with it. And again, very little is made up. The majority of what happened in the movie really did in fact happen. They even showed the footage that McCarthy released to the people calling Murrow the leader of the Jackal Pack. It's hard to believe they could really talk like that back then. It's a wonderful film that's rich in atmosphere, character, and of course, rhetoric. An easy pick for the number 7 spot.
I've got the routine.
Number 6. Lost in Translation. This is another one of those movies that just sort of seems like I've been on a nice trip. It's not really telling a story as much as taking you on an experience. The way Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson work off each other is very believable and in-depth. He knows how to capture the loneliness of being stuck in a spot you didn't expect, and trying to figure out if you should do something about it or just come to grips with the pain. I'm a big Bill Murray fan, and I would actually like to see him do more dramatic work in the future. But until then, this is my favorite film of his. I love the surreal atmosphere of Japan, and how it seems to keep changing with the mood our characters are in. Sometimes it seems welcoming, and other times it seems alienating. It's very cleverly handled. I enjoy just what these two share with each other as well. They both try to pull each other out of the darkness and find something in not just one another, but also in themselves. You really feel the love and care that they share for one another. And of course, that's the key to any great romance. Great experience for a great movie. Number 5. Eyes Wide Shut. This is a movie I could probably do a whole commentary on. The issues of love, relationships, and commitment are really put to the test in this movie. The dreamlike state the film creates forces us to confront the questions of love not just on a conscious level, but also a subconscious level. What does it mean to be married? What does it mean to fully give yourself to another person, both physically and mentally? The idea of denying the possible dark truth to settle for a comforting possible lie. It seems so unsettling, but we also know that so many couples do it. The look of this film is quintessential Kubrick. It's just like something out of a dream. Everything is blurry with the colors being muted behind shadows, and the insecurities of our characters constantly being exposed in the most uncomfortable way is something right out of a bad nightmare. There's a few things I don't enjoy though, like that piano music that starts out cool but by the end of the film you just want to strangle it. And I also never care for the last conversation between Cruise and his best friend. I mean, I know the movie is supposed to be slow, but that was just torture. Still, the contrast between the love of the body and the love of the mind are constantly being addressed. Again asking the tough questions that many couples bring up but never fully confront. It's a brilliant film and by far one of Kubrick's best. I guess it only figures that his final film would be one of his greatest, and my personal favorite. Number 4. Batman. I know it's strange putting a superhero movie over a cinematic master like Kubrick, but I really just adore this movie. This was one of the first comic book movies, if not the first comic book movie, to give itself such a dark tone. Every time I see it, it gets better and better. There's a sense that this is the real deal. This is the actual Batman. There may be variations in other stories, but this is the guy that the comics were written about. Some people still don't understand why I like this film more than The Dark Knight. And watching it again, I think there's two defining elements in it for me. One is Keaton, who is still by far the best Batman in my opinion. His control, his intimidation, the way he can swing back and forth between characters, this is the Batman I always looked up to and admired. And the other element I think can be found in this scene. There's no dialogue outside of one line, it's not important to the story, it could pretty much be cut from the film altogether. But it adds a whole nother level of atmosphere and appreciation. The music, the shots, the pacing, this movie actually allows you to breathe for a minute and take in the full size and scope of everything that is Batman. It really allows you to soak up the atmosphere. Now, I've already talked about this film to death before, so I won't go into too much more detail. All I can say is that it always felt like the real deal, and it still does. For me, you just can't beat the original. Number 3. To Kill a Mockingbird. This is one of those perfect films. There's simply nothing wrong with it. Everything works. The story, the characters, the directing, but most of all, the acting. The performances from Gregory Peck and Mary Bedham are two of the greatest in cinematic history. Peck's closing argument always sends chills down my spine, it's so good. And Bedham's reaction to Boo Radley is just unbelievable. It's funny because I usually don't get into stories about prejudice and race unless it's really being analyzed. And while it doesn't really analyze why racism is around, we certainly see it from the point of view of a child, which is often a very important way to view things at times. I also really love Robert Duvall's performance. He doesn't even have a line, and yet he leaves this unbelievable impression. That's a freaking good actor. I'm sure you've heard everybody talk about it and analyze it to death, so I won't bore you with too much more of it. But it really is just pure cinematic gold. It's dramatic, funny, suspenseful, powerful, and like I said before, just all around perfect. Number 2. Amadeus. Another movie that's just perfect. Perfect writing, perfect pacing, perfect acting, perfect directing. It's actually much like one of Mozart's operas, oddly enough. If you were to add anything or take away anything, it would cease being perfect. In fact, they released a director's cut not too long ago, and wouldn't you know it, it simply wasn't as good. As Mozart put it, you can't change something that's already perfect. Now granted, the film is not entirely historically accurate. Mozart worked very hard on his music, and there was no proof that Salieri actually wanted to murder him. But people forget this is historical fiction. It's not supposed to be true. Stop taking it so seriously. It's just a friggin' movie. But I guess you can understand how people can get so passionate about it, because it is a very passionate film. The way Salieri is in constant battle with Mozart, God, and his own sanity is just beautiful. The way Mozart battles his own demons, in contrast, is also perfect as well. I find it interesting that there's no other movies I can think of that are based on Mozart. There's a ton of Beethoven movies, but there's only one Mozart movie, the fictional one. Is it because this one was just so damn good that nobody else wants to try it? I don't know. But if that was the case, I wouldn't blame them. The music, the atmosphere, and the brilliant storytelling are beyond compare. Like sweet music in one's ear, it only seems to get better and better the more you experience it. And my number 1 favorite movie of all time is Brazil. A lot of you already know this, but if you don't, Brazil is my all-time favorite movie. Why? Because it has everything that I love. Surreal images, dark comedy, over-the-top jokes, dramatic intensity, and that otherworldly atmosphere. One of my favorite books is George Orwell's 1984, and Brazil is something of a comedic version of that. It shows how bureaucracy is killing us, materials are more valuable than life, and mankind's constant quest to deny responsibility. The images at times are cartoony and strange, but can also get creepy and disturbing, much like the tone of the film. Its futuristic world we can see very much in our own world today, in how needlessly complicated we make things to supposedly make our lives easier. Its only downfall, in my opinion, is the action. Director Terry Gilliam admitted that he couldn't really think of many creative ways to show people hurting each other. But aside from that, I truly love this film. I love how warped it is, I love how dark it is, I love how straight to the point it is, and of course I love how uncompromising it is. Every time I see it, I notice something new. Something in the background or even the foreground that I never caught before. I love films that constantly continue to evolve as time goes on, and how what's trying to say only grows more and more true. This is one of those movies I could watch 1,000 times and never be tired of it. It's unique, it's creative, it's my all-time favorite movie.